All right. So today what I want to focus on is I want you guys to be able to understand the chart. I want you guys to know how to read a birth chart. So when you guys look at a chart, I want you guys to be able to know what to focus in on and what to focus in on and how to read the chart in terms of what houses the planets are in. So I want to give you guys a couple of tools to be able to start practicing looking at people's charts and seeing where certain placements are.
Okay.
All right. And I am assuming that you guys absolutely don't know absolutely anything about how to read the chart. So I will focus on 3 planets. They're called grahas because they're not really planets, like the sun and the Rahu are not planets, but grahas means to grasp or to seize. They're energies. They're forms of energies that seize us. They grasp our consciousness. So I will call them planets anyway, just because it's easier to get across, but they're grahas in Sanskrit, which is Grahas, graha. So I will focus on these 3, the sun, the moon, and Rahu. And the reason I'm focusing on these 3 are because these are 3 key placements in a chart, including the ascendant, of course, the first house. But these ones will give you a lot of information about a person's psychology. And so when we're reading, sorry, are you guys getting feedback? Are you getting feedback? I wonder if it's my microphone.
No, I just message. Yeah, that was a small disturbance. Sorry for that.
Oh, okay. All right. So these ones will show very important psychological placements in our charts. And I'll focus on these 3, and then I'll explain how all 3 of these play out in the chart. Okay, so yeah, go ahead.
No, nothing. You just
Okay. Okay. Now, if you want, you can mute your Skype, and then you can unmute it if you have questions or anything like that. All right, so I'm going to be showing you guys how to read the South Indian chart. And last time I gave the example of both the North Indian chart and the South Indian chart. And I learned through the South Indian chart, my brain functions with the South Indian chart. So I'll be teaching you guys how to read the South Indian chart. And of course, they both have their benefits and their pros and cons. So this one is the one that I like using. So when you guys look at the South Indian chart, you guys will see this little line, okay? And this little line indicates the first house, which is the Lagna in Sanskrit. So Lagna. So this little line indicates the ascendant, Lagna or ascendant, okay? And wherever it is placed, that is the first house of the chart. Now, in some charts, it might look longer like this. It might take up the whole space, and I'll just make it, for convenience, I'll do it the small way. So this will indicate the first house, and The other way that you can tell how to see if it's the ascendant, it'll just say ascendant. It'll just say that. Sometimes they won't have a little line. It'll just say ASC, just like that, or LG probably as well. So that's for you guys to be able to see right away which one's the first house of the chart. And that's the most important thing to be able to see right away. Which one is the first house? And then you count clockwise. So if Aries is the first house, you count 1, 2, Taurus is the second house, 3, Gemini is the third house, and so on and so forth. And all the way to Pisces, which is the 12th house. If the little line is right here in Virgo, this is the first house, Libra is the second house, Scorpio is the third house, and so on and so forth. Now, the South Indian chart, the houses will change positions, but the signs are fixed. So Aries will always be right here, and Taurus will always be right here, etc. So the signs will never change. They will stay fixed. So you will always know that this corner is Sagittarius and this corner is Gemini. And eventually you guys will have these spaces memorized. And all you'll see are the planets in the spaces. You won't necessarily see that it says Virgo or Pisces. And I'll show you an example of a chart. Let's open a chart here. Let's see, I guess. Sorry, guys. This one doesn't have famous people's charts, I guess. So I'll just use, oh, here's one. Okay. So this is what it'll usually look like. And I'm using Kala software. Kala. James Goldsmith was a very wealthy man. And this is an example. So it'll show a little line. That's his first house. And in this case, it actually helps you because it has GE, it has CN for the signs. And so usually you'll just see empty spaces and the planets. And then you want to see, okay, he has 4 planets here. What house is that? You can count backwards also. You can count, this is the first house. You can say 12, 11, 10. So you can count backwards to make it easier. Or you count, there's 3 planets here. You can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is the 5th house. So he has Ketu, Mars, and Jupiter in the 5th house. 12, he has Moon in the 12th house. 11, 12, 11, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5. In the 11th house, he has Mercury, Rahu, Sun, and Venus. 12, 11, 10. He has Saturn in the 10th. So if you guys feel comfortable, look at your own charts that I sent you and figure out where you have the sun placed. Count the houses, and SU is for sun. So just count where you have that little line and make note of what house and what sign the sun is placed in. Okay. So if it's right here, that's your first house. And then you count 2nd house, 3rd house, 4th house, 5th house, etc. Okay. So 3, obviously you'll know what your first house is based on this little line. This house, the sign where the little line is placed will be very important, as important as the sun and the moon placements. So the sign that this little line is placed, make note of that sign and read up on it online. Just go online and see. I want to start off by giving you guys tools where you guys can look up a chart, type, if you guys have JHora software, and that's free online. You guys can download it through, it's Jagannath Hora. And if you guys have any questions on that software, you can message me and I'll tell you how. I'll give you guys the link to download that. It's a free software to look at Vedic astrology charts. So always see what sign the first house is in and make note of that sign. And you can just go online and say, okay, first house Sagittarius. And it doesn't matter if it gives you a Western or Vedic definition, because they both have similar characteristics in terms of signs and houses. What the signs indicate, what the houses indicate, usually Western and Vedic are congruent. So you can either look at KR's channel and he'll describe the first house. Well, he has planets in the houses. You can just say here, first house Sagittarius. Okay. So this is a good exercise for you guys to do, to look at your friends and family members' charts and see if it makes sense. Like, okay, my friend is Sagittarius. Does that person seem like a Sagittarius? And just don't just use one. Do your research. That's how I learned. But I will give you guys those definitions anyway. I will give you guys that information. But if you guys want to search deeper, then I want you guys to know how to read the chart so you guys can do your own research. And so same thing for sun. Wherever your sun is placed, count the houses and look sun in so-and-so house. Okay, so why is the sun important? Well, the sun is our soul's purpose. It shows where in life we want to self-actualize and how we like to express ourselves in the world. So whatever house the sun is placed in, it shows our style of achieving recognition, what we want to be recognized for, what we like having attention in, or even at a subconscious level, maybe not consciously what we like to have to be recognized for, or how we like to express ourselves, but even in a subconscious way, how we actually express ourselves in the world. So it can be conscious or subconscious, but it will be a very important placement in the chart, because it's connected to our soul's purpose. It's connected to a very innate quality in our charts. Okay, so for example, if the sun is placed in the first house, okay, then the person will very strongly relate to first house qualities. The person wants to express themselves through the first house significations. And in this case, it would mean the first house has to do with our personality, with how we present ourselves in the world. It's literally our physical body, ourselves. So a person with the sun in the first house will demonstrate the solar qualities, which are solar qualities have to do with recognition, with expression, self-expression, with authority. So a person with sun in the first house will be authoritative. They will be comfortable in positions of supervision, positions of power. They will be very comfortable expressing themselves in public, because the sun, all the planets revolve around the sun. So they love being the center of attention and expressing that. So they will focus on their first house, on the attention is on them, and they like gaining recognition through their own personality. So that would be sun in the first house. And then you can get even more information depending on what sign it is. So how will they get recognition in the first house? But I won't go there yet because that's a little bit more advanced. For now, we'll just focus on the houses. If Sun is placed in the second house, then the second house has to do with sustenance. The second house is the house of wealth, of here, let me see. I don't know if I should have. I'm gonna open a new page here, and I'm gonna copy this so that I can do this as I speak. And I'll just use these as the original houses. First house, okay. So second house has to do with sustenance, with wealth, with speech. Okay, so the second house has to do with our income, and that's our day-to-day income. It is the income that we generate from our 9-to-5 job. So the second house has to do with income as well. So when the sun is placed in the second house, or the moon, okay, then we find these topics in life very important. So for example, if the sun is in the second house, we want to express ourselves through speech. So we might be good speakers, or it's also related to Taurus. So second house, so the sign and the house are related. They have similar significations. Okay, second house and Taurus. So the person will be attached, will find self-expression through income, through their wealth, through the money they receive, through having security, material security in life, because Taurus has to do with having material security. So this person will feel comfortable expressing themselves in this way. And then the second house has to do with the face and with, especially with the mouth, in terms of the body parts. So because it has to do with the face, with the mouth, with speech, it's what speech, how we communicate to others, and also the food that we like to eat, the sustenance, the type of food that nourishes us. That's also the second house. So you can tell not only if the sun is placed in the second house, that will be something that will find our soul purpose in expression through the second house. But if you have other planets in these houses, these planets will express themselves in that way as well. So third house, if you guys have any questions, you can chime in at any time. Okay, so third house and Gemini. If the sun is in the third house, then we will find communication very important. We will find that we like getting recognition, or we like getting attention through communication. And communication could have to do with writing or with speech as well, marketing. So any kind of verbal or written communication. A person with sun in the third house will feel, will like to self-actualize through communication. And the third house has to do with courage and with self-effort as well. So a person with sun in the third house, they are very courageous. They are bold. They have, they rely on their own self-effort to achieve things. So usually a person with the sun in the third house, They have the ability to create their own reality through self-effort, and they usually won't go to an astrologer to say, hey, what does my fate say? What's my destiny? Usually they won't do that because they rely on their own self, on their self-effort. Third house has to do with hands, arms and hands. So they rely on their own hands, on their own work. They're usually not the ones who will ask, how will my future be? Because they don't have to. They can rely on themselves. A person with Sun in the fourth house or in the sign of Cancer. So you guys can also, or in that sign, in that house or in that sign, okay? So a person who has Sun in the fourth house or in Cancer, their home life will be very important. The home will be important to them. So they may like to find self-expression either in the family, in their home, by building a family, by nurturing others in the home. They like to be a good host. They enjoy maybe throwing parties at their own house and catering to people and cooking for others and nurturing others. Or they like to find their self-expression through real estate, through buying properties. So the home could be in terms of nurturing others, or this could include vehicles as well, any kind of vehicles. So with Sun in the fourth house, the person will express themselves. And the Sun also has to do with work. So it is one of the karakas for career, and karaka means significator. So the Sun is one of the significators of career, of the 10th house. The Sun is actually the best placement of the Sun is in the 10th house. It feels the most comfortable there. So the work that we do, wherever Sun is placed, we will be comfortable in expressing ourselves in whatever, the significations of these houses as I'm going through them. So in the fourth house, you will find a person with the Sun in the fourth house. Maybe they work at a dealership selling cars, selling vehicles, boats or airplanes or properties, working in real estate, or they like working from home. That's another example. And with the Sun in the fourth house, you'll also find that the person, their home, they love sunshine in their home. So they'll be the kind of person that will open the blinds and let all the sunshine in. And they love space in their homes. Fifth house, Leo. The fifth house is a house of creativity, children, spiritual practices, entertainment, romance. So a person with Sun in the fifth house will tend to have a creative streak. That could include any kind of artistic qualities, such as dancing, writing poetry, writing novels, writing books, painting, playing music, creating, anything that has to do with creative ability. That's the fifth house, Sun in the fifth house. Sun feels very comfortable in the fifth house because the natural fifth house is the sign of Leo. So Sun feels very comfortable in this house in being creative. Sun itself actually is a creative graha. It likes to create. So that's another thing, that wherever you find the Sun placed, likes to be creative in that domain of life. So, for example, being in the third house, Sun likes to be creative in communication and things having to do with the hands. That this could also include artwork, because the third house is in the 11th house from the 5th. So see 12, 11. And the 11th house has to do with gains. So gains of the 5th house. And this is really advanced stuff that I'm throwing at you guys. So you guys don't have to think too hard on this. We'll come back to that later. But the Sun in the third house feels comfortable creating with their hands, like crocheting maybe, or sewing, or drawing, anything that is also included in the 5th house. Second house, they like to be creative with their speech, with how to make wealth, how to bring more income into the house. They like to be creative with how to make more money, how to have more sustenance. Fourth house, they like to be creative in how to nurture others. Okay. So in the 5th house, the creativity could include how to be spiritual, how to do spiritual practices in order to grow in a spiritual way, because the 5th house is one of the spiritual houses. And the 5th house is also entertainment. So a person with the Sun in the 5th house, they love entertainment. So they could be good entertainers. They could love entertaining others, or they just love the idea of doing things that are fun, exciting. It's a positive placement. Romance. The 5th house is a house of romance, of love, and enchantment. So, you know, when you first meet someone, what do? You guys do things that are entertaining. You guys go out to the movies, to the theater. You might write a love note. So there's that creativity aspect of it. Writing notes to the partner or whatnot. You're creative in how to achieve enchantment and romance and love. And so the 5th house is the house of romance. It's when the people are just starting to date. 7th house is where you're already in a deep relationship. But the 5th house is when you're just meeting people. You're just getting to know them in the beginning. Okay. Sun in the 6th house, similar to the sign of Virgo. And are these letters too small for you guys, or are you guys able to read this fine? Or should I make it larger? Okay, thank you. All right, so Sun in the 6th house. The 6th house is a house of service, health, and competition. So with Sun in the 6th house, the person feels very comfortable in positions of service. And service could have anything to do with service to others. There's no one way of being of service to others. Being of service to others comes in just an infinite number of ways. We can be service to others by working, at a fast food restaurant. you're serving others. You can be a service to other at a hospital by nursing others, being a nurse or a doctor. And healing could have to do, the sixth house has to do with health. And so healers are a sixth house, have strong sixth houses. They have prominent sixth houses. Maybe they have a sun in the sixth house, because a healer is serving others. Or the sixth lord is placed in a prominent house, like the ninth house maybe. And I'll get more into that later, but a prominent sixth house, or the sixth lord in the first house, whoever rules that house. But for now, we're just focusing on the sun. So sorry for getting carried away here. I don't want to make it too complicated for you guys. So any kind of service, sun in the sixth house, a person working at a bar, being a bartender, any kind of work, any kind of the 9 to 5 jobs are represented by the sixth house. Working 9 to 5, 5 days a week, that's a sixth house job. You're doing service in your work. It doesn't matter what you're doing. That's why the 9 to 5 job is represented by the sixth house, because regardless of what you're doing, there's some sort of service that you're performing for your company or for your clients. So a person with sun in the sixth house will probably, they enjoy serving others and they want to find a way to serve others. They feel comfortable in that domain. And then the sixth house also has to do with competition and enemies. So the person might be competitive also. They feel comfortable, they feel comfortable competing, and so, you know, it doesn't have to be enemies, just competitors. Competitors can be seen as enemies, but they're just your competitors. But our enemies help us grow, because if we didn't have competitors, we wouldn't strive to be better than them. So the sixth house has to do with competition, competitors, and enemies as well. So litigation is an example of the sixth house. You know, going to court, for example. So a person who has sun in the sixth house, at some point, if they're running the sun dasha, they might find themselves either going to court for something. They might find themselves in a healing position, definitely in a service position, or healing themselves as well. Health. You finding ways of healing themselves. Ayurveda, Oriental medicine, that's all in the sixth house. The seventh house and the sign of Libra are all about relationships. Partnerships and business as well. And why business? Because anytime you're doing business, you either are doing it with a partnership, you open a business with someone, or you have clients. You have one-on-one clients. So when sun is in the seventh house, relationships are very, very important to that person. They need a relationship. They defer to others. What does that mean, deferring to others? It means wanting to be of service to others. A person with sun in the seventh house will learn through relationships. relationships are a key. They find expression through relationships. They self-actualize in relationship. So the person is meant to grow spiritually through relationships. And one of the other qualities that I didn't mention regarding the sun is self-esteem. So we also, wherever the sun is placed in the chart, our self-esteem relies on that. So if we fail to do whatever domain in life that the sun is placed in, then our self-esteem tends to go down. So wherever the sun is placed, our self-esteem goes up when we do work in that area, when we do service in that area, in that domain of life. So with sun in the 7th house, our self-esteem is based on relationship. We like to self-express, and this could include partnerships as well, opening a business, or having clients in whatever domain of life we work in. We feel good about that. Now, the sun in the 7th house, if it's placed in Libra, sun is actually the weakest in the 7th house. Why is the sun the weakest? The weakest placement is either the 7th house or the sign of Libra. It is the weakest. It is called Nicha. Sun in the 7th house is here, let me write this down. Nicha, which means debilitated, and don't get scared by these words. It is just the weakest placement of the sun. Ucha is the opposite, which means exalted. Why is the sun the weakest in the 7th house? It is because the sun likes to rule. The sun is the center of attention. The sun is where all the planets revolve around the sun. It is the number one. But when the sun is in the 7th house, then the sun places itself in the position of service to others, or learning how to be of service to others. And it feels uncomfortable because usually the sun's not used to that. The sun is usually the boss. That's why the sun in the 1st house is strong, and in the 10th house it's strong. The sun is strong in the 10th house because it rules. It likes to be the supervisor. It likes to be the ruler. It likes to govern. That's why, and we'll get to that. But in the 7th house, it feels uncomfortable because now, you can't get along in a relationship if you try to govern your partner. It just doesn't work. So that's why, it could happen that the person develops, sun is in the 7th house because they are learning through relationship how to have humility, how to be humble, how to defer to others and be of service to others, something that the sun is very uncomfortable doing. So that's one of the lessons of having the sun in the 7th house, is learning how to be of service to the other person and not to want to be the ruler. Or it could be the opposite, where sun in the 7th house, we might attract someone who has that quality of wanting to rule us. That's why the sun in the 7th house is weak, because usually we defer to others a little bit too much. That could also happen, where we don't have our own voice. We don't express ourselves the way we should, and we end up attracting a partner who wants to rule us. And that's where the difficulties arise. So there's it's a really balancing The seventh house is the house of balance. Libra is the sign of balance. So anything, any planet being in the seventh house or in Libra, there's a beautiful balance, that an equilibrium that needs to be achieved through relationships. House or the sign of Scorpio. So when Sun is in the eighth house, what does the eighth house have to do with? The occult, mystery, transformation, sudden events, obstacles. This is the house of sex, death, and taxes. It's the stuff that we like death and taxes, stuff we don't want to deal with, but it's inevitable. What does occult mean? It means something that's hidden. So when Sun is in the eighth house, it loves things that are hidden. It loves mystery. The person loves mystery. Loves doing research about hidden things, about mysteries in life, and loves to see what's beneath the surface of things. Or Scorpio, eighth house or Scorpio. So the person is a very good researcher, regardless of the topic of research. Astrology goes under the eighth house because it is a hidden knowledge. It is something we have to do research to know what's behind the surface. On the surface, we just see the person. Astrology reveals the hidden aspects of each person. So the eighth house has to do with all kinds of occult things. And when Sun is in the eighth house, the person will prefer to express themselves through research or in hiding. They are not the kind of person that want to be out in public. They prefer to hide out and stay invisible or unrecognized. And they prefer to delve into mysteries and research and find the truth of life they like to dig very deep. They're not satisfied with surface information. They want to go deep, deep, deep. Like get to the root. The eighth house is a house of transformation and sudden events. So a person who has Sun in the eighth house or in Scorpio, they will find that they go through a lot of sudden events in life, especially during the Sun dasha or subcycle. They go through transformative events. So they go through strong, deep transformation in life when Sun is in the eighth house, whether they want to or not. It is also a healing house. It's a healing house because we heal through transformation. So the person who has Sun in the eighth house, they either like to be healers or they go through healing. The eighth house is a house of power also. So power struggles are also related to the eighth house. So when a person has Sun in the eighth house, they love it's kind of like the kind of power that likes to manipulate. So it's the kind of power that likes to They like to have power over others, but not in the way of being the boss of others, like in the 10th house of work, but in a way of being manipulative in a way. They tend to attract people that might also express these qualities to them. And so they kind of need to learn how to defend themselves. So they also learn how to identify manipulation when they see it in others. But people who have Sun in the 8th house, they want to transform other people's lives. They want to transform. So they love to help others in that way. They love to help others through transformation. They love to heal. They like to be healers in a transformative way. So we find a lot of psychologists also. If Sun is in the 8th house, the person might also lean towards psychology, healing others through getting to through the deep subconscious mind and having subconscious feelings come to the surface, transforming people. So, you know, if you find someone who has Sun in the 8th house, you know, that person will always harbor hidden thoughts. They're always thinking about things they're always trying to hide their thoughts. They're not necessarily verbal, but they're always thinking something. And sometimes they might, depending on the Sun, how the Sun is in this house. But like, let's say, maybe if Saturn is aspecting the Sun in this house, they might always feel suspicious about other people. They're always kind of thinking like, is that person talking about me, or is that person doing something? So that's that's another way that the Sun expresses itself is the positive way is where they love transforming other people's life and they love being healers. But if it comes out in a negative way, they're suspicious of other people. And so that can cause obstacles, which was the next thing, but it's hiding here. That can cause obstacles in their lives because they're expecting negative things from other people, and then they attract what they're expecting. Now the 9th house, if Sun is in the 9th house or Sagittarius, 9th house is a spiritual house. And it has to do with higher knowledge or wisdom, higher education, like the university, dharma, religions, or spirituality, and the guru. So when Sun is in the 9th house, the person feels very, very strongly. They want to express themselves in a spiritual way. They crave higher knowledge. They crave wisdom. They crave spiritual things. Or in the sign of Sagittarius. They're not satisfied. They love expressing themselves through spirituality. So they seek higher knowledge or higher wisdom. It's also the house of the PhD and master's degree. So that's another way of seeking higher knowledge and higher wisdom through getting a degree. Or through finding a guru or a religion in which they can express their self-expression, their creative self through religious pursuits or spirituality. So Sun in the ninth house, Sun in the ninth house or in the 10th house are good placements for the Sun because that's where the Sun is rising towards noon. When Sun is in the 10th house, it's noon time during the day. So the path of the Sun during a 24-hour cycle is a path through all the 12 signs of the zodiac. So when the Sun is in the 9th and 10th house, it's like 11 in the morning, noon, anywhere between 11 and 2 p.m. The Sun is out there. It's shining. It's light. So it feels comfortable in these houses. So the Sun in the 10th house gets Digbala. What does that mean, Digbala? It means directional strength. Actually, I'll put it over here. Digbala means directional strength. It's most powerful in that placement. So the Sun feels the most comfortable in the 10th house. It loves the 10th house. 10th house is career, government, work, any kind of work where we get recognition for it. All right, let's see. Jyotsna has a question. When you say houses, I am getting confused with the ascendant. Do we consider houses in respect to the Sun because he is Lord, or in respect to the ascendant? Good question. Okay, so when I say houses, I mean in respect to the ascendant. And the reason I'm putting it in along with the signs is because the houses and the signs are related. The natural second house, which is Taurus, relates to significations of the second house. That's why I'm putting these here, but we're talking about in respect to the ascendant. So where the ascendant is placed. So if the ascendant is Virgo, for example, okay, wherever the Sun is placed, we count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So if the Sun is placed here, it is 8 houses. It is in the 8th house. So I'm going through the placements of the Sun in the houses from the ascendant, from the first house. From wherever this little line is. Wherever that little line is in your chart, count from that little line clockwise and see where the Sun is placed. And wherever the Sun is placed from that little line, then you look at what house that is. Is it the 7th house? Is it the 5th house? And so that house will correspond to the natural sign of that house also. Like the 7th house naturally corresponds to Libra. But you also look at the sign. So if Aries is not your first house, if it's Virgo, for example. So let's say the Sun is here in the 3rd house, 1, 2, 3. So then you would be looking at the sign of Scorpio because this little box is Scorpio. And you would also be looking at the 3rd house, which relates to Gemini. You'd be looking at both because the 3rd house, Sun is in the 3rd house. And this is the 3rd house, has to do with communication, courage. And you would look at Scorpio also because this box is Scorpio. She's asking another question, so I'm going to wait here. All right, she says, okay, yeah, she says, so I look at the sun house and third house from the ascendant. Yes, so you look at the house from the little line from the ascendant and the sign of that house. And it'll change for everyone, unless you have Aries ascendant. Okay. Yep, you're welcome. So if the sun is in Capricorn, in this little box, or in the 10th house from your ascendant, then the sun feels very comfortable. So it gets Digbala when it's in the 10th house. It's also strong in Capricorn, but it's stronger when it's in that actual house, no matter what sign it is. Could be in the 10th house in Cancer, if the Libra is the first house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Oh, sorry, 9, 10. No, wait, yeah. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There. So the 10th house could be Cancer, depending on where your first house is. And so it gets directional strength, Digbala. The sun is very well placed in the 10th house, as well as Mars, both of those. The sun in the 10th house is a hard worker. The person is a hard worker. They usually get into supervisory positions. They're usually the directors or supervisors of the company. And they usually work in companies. Usually sun in the 10th house is not always, I mean, it could be a person who opens their own business, but usually having an own business is usually the 7th house. Usually the 10th house is mainly a company where you're supervising employees. You're supervising a lot of other people, or a government job also. Usually with the sun in the 10th house. But you know, you can tweak it depending on the planets that are associated with the sun. But for now, we're just looking at the sun in isolation. The 11th house, or the sign of Aquarius. The 11th house is easy gains, friends, communities, groups of people, clubs, enjoyment, pleasures. So a person who has sun in the 11th house is they usually have it easy in life. They love enjoying themselves. They have easy gains financially. Easy gains. They usually don't have to work hard for their money. Or if, you know, if a prominent planet is in the 11th house, such as the ascendant lord or the sun or Jupiter, but for now the sun. The person has it easy, and they love communities, they love groups. They love to influence people, masses, groups or masses of people. So with the sun in the 11th house, they definitely like to influence groups. They express themselves in front of groups, in front of people, in front of masses. They also it's an easy house. It's a house of gains. It's a house of pleasure. It's a Kama house, and I'll talk about the Purusharthas in a second. But the 11th house is it's a pleasure house. So enjoying and, having easy financial gains. What does that mean, easy financial gains? Well, it could indicate side ventures. So it's not usually the money you make from your 9 to 5 job. That's usually the second house of sustenance and wealth. 11th house is also wealth, but it's easy wealth. Oh, sorry. And you know what? I forgot to say the 9th house is also a house of wealth. The 9th house is also a wealth house for Sagittarius. So the 5th house. I apologize, guys. The 5th house is also a house of wealth. The 2nd house, the 5th, the 9th, and the 11th. These are the wealth houses. These are the financial houses. So when Sun is placed in any of these houses, the 2nd house, 5th, 9th, or 11th house, the person has good luck in wealth. 9th house is not only wealth, but good luck also. It's the house of good luck, good fortune. Good fortune in general. And so the kind of wealth that you get with the 2nd house is wealth you work for from your 9 to 5 job. And the 8th house could be a house of wealth also because it's sudden events. It's the house of sudden events. So what does that mean? Wealth through sudden events. It could be inheritance, lottery. That's a sudden event. You don't expect it. The 8th house is the house of death, which I didn't mention either, because it's a transformation house. The transformation. Death is not the end. It's only a transformation. You're only transforming from one life to another, but it's not the end. It's only a transformation. But the 8th house is the house of death. So usually inheritance is connected with the 8th house. The death of someone gives you the sudden event of inheritance. Or lottery, that's a sudden event. The 11th house is easy gains, like huge sums of money also. So this could also be connected to that, especially if they're both connected to each other. Like let's say 11th Lord is in the 8th house. Then you could see like a sudden event like the lottery. It changes your life. Anything that changes your life drastically, that's the 8th house. So the 9 to 5 income is the steady income. So it's wealth, but it's a steady wealth. Steady income or savings. Your savings account. That's the 2nd house. The 11th house is not steady income. It's like, boom, there you suddenly have $10,000. How did you get it? Well, you made a big sale. You work for commission and you made a big sale. That's the 11th house. So people who work in positions where they work for bonuses or commission or tips, they get sudden gains, easy gains. They didn't really work hard for it. They didn't have to work 40 hours a week, to get that money. It just, boom, it just happened. That's the 11th house. It's a fun house. It's also the house of the elder sibling. Have Sun in the 11th house, you might be close to your elder sibling. Or the elder sibling tends to be bossy towards you. That could also. And finally, the 12th house. If you have Sun in the 12th house or in the sign of Pisces. 12th house has to do with renunciation. Detachment, yoga, retreats. Places of isolation. That could include hospitals, prisons, monasteries, yoga retreats. It's the bedroom and bed pleasures. It's the house of bed pleasures. So when the sun is traveling through the 12th house, that's usually around 9 in the morning. Wait, is that right? 9 in the morning. Yeah, it's around 9 in the morning. Because the rising sign is the first house. That's usually when the sun is rising in the horizon, on the eastern horizon. So then it gets later and later backwards, counterclockwise. That's why around the 10th house or the 9th house, it's around noon time or 2 p.m. So around 9 in the morning, usually like, and I heard this from someone else who was talking about the houses. When we wake up or at sunrise, for example, we have a lot of energy. Like let's say we wake up at 6 in the morning. I mean, maybe it doesn't happen to everyone. I know I have a hard time regardless, but most people, many people, they are very energetic when they wake up at sunrise. And then if we wake up around 9 in the morning, it's like, I don't want to get up. It's, when we wake up at 9 or 10, there's less energy and we feel kind of like the rest of the day, we feel very low energy. Well, that's because at 9, 10 in the morning, the sun is traveling 12th house. And that's bed pleasure. So we want to stay in bed. We enjoy the pleasure of the bed. We don't want to get out of bed. So it's definitely good to wake up earlier if we want to get that extra energy. But it's also the sexual pleasures as well. The bedroom. Places of isolation. So that's the bedroom, the bathroom, the retreat, out in the woods in a cave. That's a 12th house. It's also a house of international affairs. So, sun in the 12th house, I've seen many charts where the person had sun in the 12th house and they live in a foreign country. They moved away from home. And a lot of people moved to the United States from a foreign country. From India, from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from China, from somewhere else. When I see people's charts, they have sun in the 12th house. It's interesting. They were born in another country, but they came here when they were small or during any time in their life. It could also mean working in a career where you deal with international affairs. You have international dealings because the sun is a karaka for work, for career. So the sun is a karaka. Karaka for work. So wherever the sun is placed, it's not only our sole purpose or how we find expression in life, but it's also related to career. So it might actually be something we do for work. But most of the time, it's just the way we express ourselves. The only way it could have to do with actual work, with career, is if it's connected to the 10th house Lord. But don't worry about that for now. If sun is in the 12th house, that could be international affairs. The person will need to have alone time when a person has sun in the 12th house. They only recharge their energies when they're alone in their own room. They need downtime from other people. They could be around other people, but only so much. They eventually need to retreat and find space for themselves and just enjoy their own company. They enjoy their own company. The 12th house is also a house of addictions, as well as the 6th house. But, you know, they express themselves differently. But the 6th house addictions could have to do with drugs because of its connection with health and healing and hospital. That's why the drugs, the kind of addiction would be related to health and healing. The 12th house could also have to do, you know, with drugs, but the kind of addiction would be more addicted to computer games, for example. The person likes to stay in their room and have their alone time, but they're addicted to a computer game. They don't want to come out of their room. Or they're addicted to bed pleasures. Now, Sun in the 12th house, you won't see addictions unless there's other planets that will confirm that. Unless you have Rahu and Venus there also, or something like that. So you know, if Sun is in the 12th house or if Sun is in the 6th house, it doesn't mean the person has addictions. That house has to do with that. So it could also mean that the person works in service, helping other people through their addictions. Like a social worker, for example, Sun in the 6th house, and then Sun in the 12th house, the person may help others with their addictions through being yoga masters and teaching yoga. You know, I mean, you could be creative with the qualities. And I didn't write this, but it's the personality, the body, the self-image. Self-expression for the first house. Okay, so the Sun is the expression, how we like to express ourselves. Now, I'm going to leave this up here and we'll talk about the Moon. Okay, so we look at where the Moon is placed. And wherever that placement of the Moon is, it's where we have our emotional security.
Yeah, Monica, I have a question here.
Yes.
For a politician, if we see the placement of the Sun, it should be in the 10th house or 11th house for a strong upcoming as a great politician.
But both, you could have it for both, because in the 11th or in the 10th house, the Sun is up in the sky, it's shining. Yeah. Anywhere where the Sun is placed from the 7th through the 12th house, that could be a good placement for a politician. Why do I say that? Because from the 7th house through the 12th house, the Sun is in the daytime, so the Sun is shining its light. And then from the 1st house through the 7th house, first house through the 7th house, it's nighttime. It's the middle of the night. So usually when the Sun is placed in between the 1st and the 7th house, in any of these 1, 2, 3, 4, any of these, the person usually likes to stay out of view of the public. They usually like to do things having to do with behind the scenes. But from the 7th house through the 12th house, the person is in the public's eye. So a politician can have a Sun in the 7th house and be in the public's eye. They could have Sun in the 8th house. The 8th house is one of the exceptions, obviously, because it's a hidden house. But they could still be a politician because of the manipulation of getting their own way and doing things and having power and transformation. But the 10th and 11th house are definitely politician houses. Definitely, because the 10th house for sure, it's a government house. But the 11th house also, because it has to do with groups of people, with masses, with communities. So a politician by default is working with the community, with groups. They're influencing groups of people and masses. So Sun in the 11th house, definitely politician. Could be one of the job domains for sure.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So that's one of the things that to look out also. If you if you want a quick snapshot, who am I looking at? The person's chart. Not only just for the sun, but let's say you're looking at all the planets at once. Let's say all the planets are situated in these first 7 houses from the ascendant, counting from the ascendant, not counting from Aries, but counting from the ascendant. From the ascendant, if all the planets are placed from houses 1 through 7, the person likes to stay out of the public's view. They don't like to be in public. I mean, they don't like to be famous. They don't want to be famous. They want to do work behind the scenes. And if the person has the houses, all the planets in between houses 7 through 12, then they love being in the public's view. They love dealing with the public, doing things, being seen by the public. That's one way where even if you don't know how to read a chart, that's a quick way. It tells you the theme of the chart. You'll get a quick instance where, and if they have planets in both sides, then they could go either way. They could go either way. They have more of a balanced, like, yeah, I could be behind the scenes or I could be in public or both. But that's one of the ways, because sometimes we see charts where all the planets are in one house or in 2 houses. So you look, are they between houses 1 and 7 or houses 7 and 12? And you can tell if that person in general likes to be in the public's view, like being a politician, or if they don't. They want to be behind the scenes. And you could look at it from the sun. From the moon. Okay. So let's say that you don't know, you're not 100% sure what time you were born or what time the person was born. Then check to see where the moon is placed. And you count from that position. So let's say that the moon is placed here. And let's say the sun is placed here. You take the moon as the first house. Okay? If you don't know the time. And even if you do know the time, this gives you more information about a person's chart. You don't look at it just from the ascendant. You also look at it from the moon. So you count the moon as the first house. Because the moon doesn't change so quickly the way the ascendant changes every 2 hours. The moon changes once every 2.5 days. So you look to see where the moon is, and you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That will also apply. Sun in the 9th house, because it is in the 9th house from the moon. So check to see the sun's position from the moon as well. And you could use these qualities if you're not 100% sure of the time of birth. And also if you do know the lagna and you want more information. The person can have sun in the 9th from the moon and in the 3rd house from the ascendant. So like the ascendant could be here. A Scorpio could be their ascendant. So now the sun is in the 3rd house, 1, 2, 3 from the ascendant, and in the 9th house from the moon. So both apply to the person. Both qualities. They have both third house qualities and ninth house qualities, both. So just, you could look at it from both. Now let's look at the position of the moon itself. Wherever the moon is placed, we depend on that domain of life for security and support. It's where we receive our own personal emotional nurturance. It's also how we give and receive nurturance and support. Now, the moon is a very, very, very important graha. And we'll talk more about the moon in later classes, about the influences on the moon itself, because the moon is the mind. And with the mind, we perceive, and the mind influences our emotions. So however the moon is influenced in a chart, that is how the person views the world. But we'll talk about that later. For now, wherever the moon is placed, that's where we find emotional security. So for example, if the moon is in the fourth house, we find emotional security in the home. If the moon is in the first house, and I guess I'll quickly go through these. I'm not going to go as in depth as with the sun, but just quickly. If the moon is in the first house, the person finds satisfaction through being known physically, through self-expression, through the personality, through the body. If they have moon in the second house, they don't feel comfortable unless they have a savings account. That's where their emotional security comes in. If there's no savings account, if they don't have that sustenance, they feel insecure. In third house, they feel comfortable only when they're communicating. They feel emotional security through communication. So if someone comes to you and they have moon in the third house, if you're the kind of person that doesn't talk much, they're going to be feeling very uncomfortable around you. Because they don't know if you're coming or going. They need communication. That's how they feel comfortable. They might actually be very articulate. They might talk a lot, but that you wonder, why are they talking a lot? Or if they have moon in Gemini, well, that's how they have their security, their emotional security. They only feel emotionally secure if they express themselves through the qualities of these houses. And you can kind of extrapolate. Fifth house, emotional security if they're being creative in some way or form, or doing their spiritual practices, or in romance. They only have emotional security if they have romance in their lives. Sixth house, they have emotional security by being in service to others. And it's different from the sun. The sun in these houses expresses itself in that way. It loves to find self-expression. It likes to be recognized for doing these things wherever the sun is placed. It wants recognition. But the moon in these houses doesn't need recognition. It needs validation. So it doesn't need to be applauded for doing whatever it is. The sun needs to be recognized and applauded, but the moon doesn't need to be recognized, but it won't have the security if it's not fulfilling the domain of that house. So moon in the sixth house gets the emotional security by being of service to others, by being healers. Seventh house, it has its emotional security by being in a relationship. If it's not in a relationship, the person's not in a relationship, then they feel insecure. They feel like they're not being supported in life if they're not in a relationship. 8th house, they feel emotionally secure by being transformative or seeking occult knowledge. That's where they get their emotional security from. Doing research and finding hidden knowledge. 9th house, spirituality or religion. They get their emotional security by being spiritual, being religious, or through higher education, through getting that degree, getting that PhD. That's where they get their emotional security from. Or through a guru. They need that father figure or mother figure. 10th house. If a person has moon in the 10th house, they will not feel secure unless they have that position, that career. That's how they feel emotionally secure. They need to have that career. It's different from sun in the 10th house. Sun in the 10th house shines in the 10th house. They don't need it, they don't need to career or work to feel emotionally secure. They naturally express themselves. They feel comfortable in that domain. The moon is different. The moon needs to have this to feel secure and supported. In the 11th house, the person needs to be around groups of people, needs to be involved in groups, in communities, or needs to be surrounded by friends to feel that emotional security. They don't need to influence the masses necessarily. They just need to be surrounded by these people. And in the 12th house, they need it's similar to the sun because they also do need their alone time. But sun in the 12th house, they feel emotionally secure by seeking detachment, from life. The moon in the 12th house may feel isolated, but they look for security through yoga retreats, through monasteries, through deeper spiritual practices, because the 12th house is also a spiritual house. It's also a spiritual house. It's deeper spirituality than just the 9th house. The 12th house is moksha. It's the final liberation from life. So it's deep. It's meditation. Person with moon in the 12th house needs to meditate. If they don't meditate, they will not have peace of mind or security. They need to meditate. Now, that's the difference between the sun and the moon. And now you guys have tools to be able to look at a person's chart and say, okay, how does the person find self-expression? How do they like to shine in life? How do they like to be recognized? What do they want to be recognized for? Look at the sun. They love to be recognized for this. And look at it from the lagna and from the moon. Now the moon, obviously you can't look at it from the moon because it's the moon, but the moon, you could look at it from the sun, vice versa. If you don't know what time the person was born, look at the placement of of the moon from the sun. So it's the opposite. The moon's here. Now you take the sun as the first house. There. Now you count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The moon is in the 5th house. So now you look at the 5th house and at Taurus. So you look at both Taurus because it's sitting in Taurus and the 5th house. So the moon only feels security through 5th house and Taurus qualities, sustenance and creativity. So you can look at it vice versa. From the sun, look at the moon, and from the moon, look at the sun. If you don't have the time of birth. If you do have the time of birth, look at both or all three, from the sun, from the moon, and from the ascendant. Finally, we have Rahu. And why do I mention Rahu? Because the key planets are the sun and the moon. Grahas, the key grahas are the sun and the moon. Our security and our self-expression, our soul's purpose. So why am I mentioning Rahu instead of anything else, instead of other planets? The reason I mention Rahu is because Rahu is the reason I went from Western astrology to Vedic astrology. As soon as I saw Rahu in my chart, I was like, wow, this was the missing link in Western astrology. This was missing because in Western astrology, Rahu and Ketu are known as the nodes of the moon, but they don't really describe Rahu and Ketu. They're only described as being karmic planets or grahas. But they're all karmic because they all have karma, right? So in Western, Rahu is seen as our present karma, and Ketu is seen as our past life karma. Actually, they're both seen as past life karma, but they don't really have a lot of information. But in Vedic astrology, Rahu is a very, very important graha in the chart. Now I'll just describe how it functions in our chart. And next time I'll get into mythology. I won't get into mythology this time because I want to give you guys tools to how to read the chart. And I'll talk about mythology related to the grahas in one of the next classes. For now, just know this. Wherever Rahu is placed in a chart, we are obsessed about that domain of life. And we are obsessed most of the time in a imbalanced way, most of the time. Especially the first half of life. The second half of life, we have learned to work with Rahu. We've learned to dominate the traits of Rahu, at least if we're consciously working in our spirituality or in our evolution, personal evolution. Then we've learned to tame Rahu in the second half of life. But in the first half of life, we need to learn to tame Rahu. That's what we're learning, because wherever Rahu is placed in the chart, we are urgent, obsessive. We obsess, we're compulsive about it. We're obsessive compulsive. We're usually seeking fulfillment in that particular domain of life, and we can never find that fulfillment. Because as soon as we get whatever Rahu represents, we're suddenly dissatisfied and we need more. We want more. It's not enough. So if Rahu's in the first house, for example, we need more recognition. We're not satisfied just being a little bit recognized. We need fame. And then when we become famous, we need more fame. We need international fame. That's kind of Rahu. Now, that's only an example. Fame is only an example, but it plays out in different ways. It's tricky because it's a shadow graha. It's a chaya graha. Chaya graha means shadow. Chaya means shadow. So Rahu shows us, or Rahu shows the shadows in our chart, our blind side. Whatever Everybody has a blind spot. Rahu is our blind spot. It is where we're obsessed about something and we don't realize it. We think it's normal. We think it's normal for everyone to feel that way about that domain in life. We don't realize that we're actually obsessed and compulsive about it, and it's not normal. So you can go through these significations and you can see what Rahu is obsessed about in a person's chart. And Rahu is a really good graha to talk about when you're doing a reading with someone, even if you're a beginner and you're learning. Let's say you have because right now it's good to practice with people. So let's say you go to your brother tomorrow or your sister and you say, I'm going to read your chart. All you can do is pick where Rahu is and you can talk for an hour easy. And you just look at where Rahu's placed, and that's where they have a blind spot. Okay, so like if it's in the 6th house, then they might have a blind spot for competition. But if they win, they're not happy. They need to compete more. They need to keep competing. It could be addictions or enemies. Now, since Rahu is a Chaya Graha, then we don't even realize we have enemies if Rahu is sitting here. They're shadow enemies. Or we might make enemies without realizing it. It's like, whoa, why did that person get mad or whatever? We might subconsciously, do something that causes other people to react a certain way. Well, that's Rahu. Rahu is the blind spot. We don't realize what we're doing to have that in our lives. So I won't go through all the houses with Rahu because you guys already kind of know. Let's see here. Jyotsna has a question. How to remember the significations of the houses? Is it memorization or any other way you suggest? Good question. Yes. Memorize, memorize, memorize. And the best way to do it, there's a billion ways to memorize something, but if you make flashcards, that's probably the best way. Make a flashcard for 12 houses and signs. And I'll send you guys some flashcards. But you guys, let's see, I'm trying to think. I might help you guys. Maybe I'll give you guys some tools. But if you guys want to do it on your own, memorize these through flashcards. But for sure, you have to have these memorized. Because when you're doing a person's chart, you don't really want to go through your flashcards in front of them. So it's good to have all these memorized. And eventually, when we go through the planets, that's really the first step of becoming an astrologer. The very, very first step is memorizing the houses and the planets. And next time, we'll talk about the planets and what they signify, and I'll get into mythology about Rahu also, and then you guys will be comfortable with the planets next time. So for now, work on memorizing the houses, and so you can kind of make a story. You can make up your own story. So wherever Rahu is placed in a chart, make up a story. Make connections. So say, okay, Rahu is in the 10th house. Rahu's obsessed about career. Or Rahu is in Capricorn. Rahu is obsessed, this person is obsessed with work, work, work. Or even when Rahu is in the 6th house, because that's a house of work also. If Rahu's in the 7th house, this person is obsessed with relationships. They're not satisfied. If Rahu's in the 9th house, they're obsessed with religious pursuits. They go from guru to guru. And like I said, guys, keep in mind that Rahu will usually express itself more strongly in a chart the first half of life. Because by then, by the second half, the first half is up to 35. And after 35, we've learned to work with these energies, with these grahas. We've learned to tame them to an extent. We've learned our lessons for the most part. Everyone's at a different level of, learning to tame the mind. Because what really all these grahas are energy. They're cosmic forces that are influencing our minds. And they influence us depending on the karma that we were born with in this life. And so really, wherever Rahu is placed, or any planet in general, it's learning how to tame the mind. That's really what it's all about. And so meditation isn't only for people who have Moon in the 12th house. It could be, meditation is for everyone. So I want you guys to practice. So let's see, how do I do this? Oh, okay, I'm going to give you guys a quiz to see if you guys understood this. All right. And Jyotsna, you can type it, and Sandeep, you can answer it. All right, Sandeep, I'll have you go first. I'm going to test you. I'm going to quiz you.
Yeah.
All right, let's do this. Okay, so Sandeep, where is the sun placed from the Lagna? What house and what sign?
4,000, it's Libra, right?
Yep. And the moon?
4th, yeah.
Correct.
Moon is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10,000, it's Aries.
Perfect. Now, where is the sun placed from the moon?
Sun is from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 7th place from the moon.
Yep. And where is the moon placed from the sun?
7th place.
Perfect. All right. You got this.
Yeah.
All right. Now let's go to Jyotsna. Let's do this. Okay, you can type this. So where is the sun placed from the Lagna? I don't know. Are you there, Jyotsna? There she is. Yes. Wait, one more time. Try one more time. The sun from the Lagna, from the ascendant. What house and what sign? Nope.
I hope it's 10,000 Leo, right?
Yes. Now, why is she getting Pisces? Why are you getting Pisces? And 7th house. Oh. Okay. You get it, then you get 10 points then because you got it right for your own chart. Okay, so I'll try again and I'm gonna change it. All right, Jyotsna, where is the sun placed from this chart right here on the screen? From the Lagna. Nope. Yes, no, and yes. It's not in the 7th house, but it is in Gemini. So what house is it from the Lagna, which is right here, this little line? Count this one as the 1st house, and then count clockwise. Yep, you got it. And then how about the moon? What house and what sign? Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right. Now, Jyotsna, tell me where the sun is placed from the moon. What house and what, well, we already know what sign. So what house is the sun placed from the moon? Yes. And what house is the moon placed from the sun? Yes. Perfect. All right. So you guys pretty much understand, and this is wonderful. This is awesome. You guys understand exactly how to count from the ascendant, from the sun, and from the moon. And that's really from now on what you'll be working with. All 3 of these. You're going to see the sun and the moon as lagnas also, because those are prominent positions as well. But for now, focus on 3 planets, 3 grahas, sun, moon, and Rahu. And you can look at Rahu from the moon also, from the Lagna and from the moon, where it's placed. But if you guys don't, if you're getting too overwhelmed, just look at it from the Lagna and try to make a story around from what I told you. Make connections. So the first line, you could make a connection kind of like this. Rahu, let's say Rahu's in the 4th house, okay? Here's Rahu. So the way you're going to make the story is you're going to say, okay, this person is obsessed about ... And then you fill in the blank. This person is obsessed about home, nurturing, properties, vehicles, houses, etc. Okay? Same thing. Rahu is in the 2nd house. This person is obsessed about ... Sustenance, wealth, income, savings account, speech, that kind of stuff. So you do the same thing with the sun and the moon. With the sun, and I'll actually go here. Well, I'll stay here because that's easier. That's Rahu. With the sun, you're going to do the same thing. Sun. This person likes to express themselves through ... Through, and then you just go through wherever the house the sun is placed. 10th house, through career, through government, through work. 5th house, through creativity, through acquiring wealth, through children, through spiritual practices. 9th house, etc. And same thing for the moon, finally. I'll write it down anyway. Moon. this person, let me change. All right, where's the moon? Oh, okay, hold on. Let me delete this. So the moon, this person feels emotional security through ... And this is a very good exercise. If you guys only do those 3 things, and leave Rahu for the end, actually. If you're going to do a reading, you don't want to start with what they're obsessed about. You want to start with what they're passionate about. And there's a difference. Being passionate is more the sun, you know, the soul's purpose in life, how you want to express your passion through the purpose. And Rahu's more of obsession, of addictions, being addicted to something. Okay. And we'll leave it at that for now, you guys. Now, do you guys have any questions before we end the class? Let's see, Jyotsna has one. How the planets are placed if there's no time of birth available? How do I look from the moon? Don't we have to enter time for the placements of planets? Good question. Okay, so if you don't have the time, just put 12 noon. And the chart will generate all the planets. And the ascendant will be wrong, unless they actually were born at noon. So you can ignore the lagna. So if you don't have a place of birth time, the time of birth, look at it from the sun and from the moon, from both. So look at the moon from the sun, the little exercise that I gave you. So ignore the lagna, because if you put noon, the lagna can be anywhere and it could be wrong. So ignore the lagna and just look at the sun and count the moon from the sun to see where the moon is placed. And you can say that. You can say, okay, it's in the 8th house and it's in Capricorn. And then you just look at the Capricorn characteristics and the 8th house. And that will apply to the person. And same thing, if look at the sun from the moon's position and say, okay, it's in the 6th house in Gemini. So the person likes to express themselves through communication and through service or healing or competition. So if you don't have the time of birth, do it from the moon and from the sun. And when you're looking at Rahu, say Rahu's here, look at it from both positions. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's in the 5th house from the sun. And 12, 11, 10. It's in the 10th house from the moon. And so do it that way if you don't have the time. And you can just put the time as noon and that'll generate the chart. And then if they don't know exactly where they were born, yeah, you're welcome. If they don't know exactly the city, you can put a city that's close by, even if it's 2 hours away or 1 hour. Just find the largest city, because sometimes a person will be born in a very isolated area, and it's like, well, this, Jagannath Hora isn't pulling up this place, so just Google it and just find wherever the closest city next to that little town. Any other questions?
Yeah, Monica, I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What is the significance of these empty houses? Like, we have a lot for each house, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, it signify if the house is empty without their lot of house.
So if the house is empty, that house can still be very active. How? Because the planets will aspect that house. So let's say that you have, and I'll teach you the aspects of the planets on our very next class. But basically, Mars has 3 aspects, Jupiter has 3 aspects, Saturn has 3 aspects. Okay, so these 3 planets will, all 3 of them can possibly aspect a house. So let's say they're all aspecting Aries, but there's no planets there. But Jupiter's aspecting Aries, Mars and Saturn are aspecting Aries. Then that house will be very activated because it has the aspect of the planets, of 3 planets or 2 planets. And so the house itself will be active. So like, let's say the 3rd house, Gemini, or the 3rd house has 3 aspects from Jupiter, Venus, and Mars. Then that person will be active in communication even though there's no planet there. But for now, since I haven't taught you guys how the aspects work, that'll be too confusing for now. So you can ignore the empty houses for now. We'll get to that eventually. But you guys have a lot to work with. Like, you guys can start reading charts now from what I gave you. Because really, when I do charts myself, when I do readings, that's what I start with. I start with the sun, the moon, and the ascendant. And same thing with the ascendant, you know, wherever the ascendant is placed, the person feels passionate about those things. Same thing with the ascendant, same as the sun and the moon. And the difference between the sun and the moon from the ascendant is the ascendant, that's how people perceive the person. Wherever the ascendant is, that's how the person is perceived, even if the person doesn't try to. So for now, I want you guys to practice the sun, the moon, and Rahu, and make a story. You don't have to write it down if you don't want to, but make a story in your mind or out loud, and make a story about the person. And just make up the story. Just say, okay, just look at a random chart. And you know, it's better if you look at just random charts. Or I guess if you look at your friend's charts, they'll confirm it for you. But look at a random chart and say, okay, make up a story. The way I wrote these sentences right here. And then that will get you, like, literally you can start reading charts, just those 3 things. You don't even have to know where Mars is or Saturn. Obviously the other planets will give you a bigger story. But these are the 3 things that the person will be mostly passionate about. So and then the other thing that I mentioned about where the planets are in reference to the between houses 1 and 7, and that you can keep that in mind too. So thank you guys. If you guys don't have any other questions, any other questions before we end the class?
No, it's nice that I have got everything very clearly, and your explanation is very nice.
Thank you. Great. I'm glad to hear that. Cool. All right. So thank you so much for joining me today, and I will talk to you guys outside of class so that we can discuss our next class time. But thank you for joining me. Let me go ahead and stop the recording now.
Thank you.
You're welcome.